Bill,
Jake.
good to see you.
It's
Uh,
good to see you too.
so this is our podcast and YouTube number 7, second one under the Dream Bros new handle, and yeah, we've got way more topics and more questions, and today's topic was planning to be sexuality within dreams and without, and what does that even mean, and where does this go? And um, it's a difficult topic for me to define, even despite my work as a medical doctor and knowing, seeing patients and seeing people in the outer world, and having an inner world or dream journey version of what is gender, what is sexuality. So more gender is actually to define this more. What is gender? It should be more the topic of what I meant to say. And what is the crossover and how does that show up in dreams? And this podcast is primarily about how dreams have given us insights and stories, how it's given other people insights. And yeah, it's it can be a difficult topic for a lot of people and certainly a sensitive one for a lot of people. And thoughts, Bill?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, just hello. I'm calling in from Maine and retired plumber and dream practitioner here.
Wonderful, Bill.
Mhm. um, yeah, I mean, it's a really big topic for me around gender because it's an issue that I've dealt with my whole life or something I never quite fit into the gender norm. Got kind of teased relentlessly as a kid. I was fortunate. I'm a kind of a big guy, so I was able to kind of like defend myself against a lot of that teasing and bullying because I was a bigger person. But it's kind of a very personal subject for me. But I also think it's something that it comes up in people's dreams a lot. Like it's very very normal for people. And actually, I also want to give credit to Sarah who asked the question in the under one of our YouTube videos. She asked about like what does it mean when you show up as a different gender in a dream. So that's kind of what inspired the broader conversation about like gender and dreams. And I guess starting with like, well, what does it mean when you show up as a different gender in a dream or you experience things differently gender wise? And I'm someone who had a lot of dreams historically, and I continue to have dreams where I'm a woman or a girl. Not so much as a girl lately, although I did have one in the last year where I was a girl. And I guess I would start. Where do I want to start? I mean, I guess I'm going to start with the personal part. For me, it's been liberating to just be like, know that it's okay to play around with gender. I think that's really like, so for me, everything in dreams is really about like what's possible and is it okay to explore who I am defined by myself as opposed to what I'm supposed to be? So I was the youngest of 4 boys, and it is interesting kind of side story. They were all, and not all of them, my 2 oldest brothers were basketball stars, high school basketball stars. They weren't good enough to be college stars, but I was taller than both of them, so Bill was going to be like the star basketball. I had no interest in playing that. I mean, I like playing street ball, but I had no interest in organized sports. I had no interest in sports. But I was supposed to because I was a guy. I was a big guy, or at least I had a guy's body. And I think one of the great things about dreams is it helped me to just let go of who I'm supposed to be. And I think gender is one of the very first kind of binaries that get put on everybody, or one of the first like roles of like, oh, you're a boy, so you're supposed to be ABC, or you're a girl, so you're supposed to be ABC. And one of the things that's really lovely about dreams is they don't really care what the world thinks. Like, there's really no like, it's your dream. And if you're a woman in your dream and a girl in your, and it doesn't need to mean anything beyond what is it like for you to embody that place in your dream and what comes up for you around that. It could be like as a guy, you're so speaking from a sort of male body perspective, like it could be that it's just like a way to explore a softer side of yourself, or it could mean this whole like gender exploration. O- but at the end of the day, it really comes down to what is it like for you to have space to play around with who you are? And that's been for me partly because it was so I never really fit in to like the body type I was born with, at least in terms of the cultural expectations. I was the boy that cried. I was the boy that like I was mama's boy, like I was always a mama's boy. My brothers used to call me the lamb because I would be like, "Ma, ma." That was their big joke about me as a kid because I would go to mom because they were bigger than me and she was my last line of defense. And I just never fit the norm. I was never like the guy I was supposed to be. And for me personally, it was very liberating to just make space for like I don't fit into that gender norm that I was assigned. And I think I think it's just one kind of topic in dreams where like people have space to play around with what's important to them and who they are. So I'll start there.
Thank you, Bill. It's this is one of those topics that it's really helpful for me to think inner world and outer world and the crossover. And for those who don't speak that language or that we're having some sort of an inner journey, psychological, spiritual, metacognitive, that we can look outside of ourselves and know that there's more than one thing going on and how we feel and how we express in the world. Yet you're somebody who's been married twice, is that, or you're three times?
3 times for the podcast listeners.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've expressed in the outer world like this attachment through this gender sexuality thing, but in an inner journey, you felt X way, or like you have more than one thing going on, and how we manifest in the outer world and what's going on in our inner world and how those two things cross over um, is unique to everybody. And if there's one thing I've learned, uh, I've had, I can think at least 6 or 7 dreams where I've been a woman in dreams, and at least half of those feel like in a past time, like set in the 1700s or 1800s. And it makes me think this whole work with dreams, if past lives are true, if reincarnation is true, what if you were a different gender in past lives and you come into this life? What if you've been a woman through all of your past lives, or a number of them, and you come into this life and you're phenotypically like you have male anatomy and you look male? It has made me wonder, because there's people who certainly do have more dreams, and I've had a number of them that made me think, holy smokes, maybe past lives are true, maybe they're not true, but holy smokes, there seems a whole bunch of them set in the past. And if we have this memory that's really, really long, on the soul level, if that's actually true, and I have no idea whether it is, uh, it would make far more sense that as we come into this life, uh, it's the story's far more complex. And certainly one of the things I've done woking up personally is I've realized it's just made me less judgmental. And that's it. That because I don't know what to like. I wake up, it's like, wow, I was a woman in that dream, and I'm a man in this life. Um, and the mind likes binary things. Like the mind likes to categorize things. There's a great quote. Uh, Kierkegaard, the philosopher, I think he's, or however you categorize him. When you label me, you negate me. So we love to label things because it helps us make sense of this world. but then you deny who that person really is. And my daughter, 19-year-old daughter, Sophia, said, help me see what I had this conversation with her. Uh, Gender is a construct, is a viewpoint of some people now and many people. It's a way to frame perspective. And another quote, gender is something that is done to you. It's like, huh, how does that even work? And with I mean, my job as a medical doctor and biology degree training, some people do have ambiguous genitalia. Some people have hormonal ambiguity. And if you have female genitalia, but you have hormones that make you a very hairy person and very masculine, it just might be easier in this world to like, there's the social, easier way to live. There's the what you feel inside way to live, but it's not as cut and dry as we like to think, or as some models of binary, this is the way it is, and this is the way it is. And can we all just be less judgmental? Is how it's come to me. Um, so how did you come, like when you were growing up, Bill? Like how did you reconcile, or what did you have dreams that helped you reconcile, as we like to talk about dreams here?
I mean, it's interesting you bring up the past life thing because my first dream therapist, like, really pushed the past life thing. So it's an interesting kind of thing for me. Although none of I mean, I did have dreams where I was, like there were older settings, but I have plenty of dreams where it's not older settings, where I mean, I had a dream this year, like I think I talked about it in the podcast where I had like this long blonde hair. I looked in the mirror. I don't know if I was a woman or a man or some intersex. God only knows, like I didn't really think about it. I just thought I looked odd. Which is something I would have never felt comfortable saying 20 years ago. I wouldn't have even told anybody the dream. So, yeah, I think it just made space for me to go against what I was kind of like. What did your daughter say? Like, there's this construct about like who I'm supposed to be. And I think part of the reason my first two marriages didn't work for me was because I went in with that construct. There wasn't space for me to just be myself. And I think dreams allowed me to like say, okay, there's all this ideas of who I'm supposed to be. I'm a big guy physically. I have a big guy appearance. I was a plumber, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but it just made space for me to own that, like, there are times I feel more like a girl. I mean, I don't really have body dysmorphia. I know in the trans world, like people talk about having body dysmorphia. I feel like this is not my body. It's not so much that I feel that as I just sometimes feel as much like whatever that means, like when I step into a place in a dream where I'm a girl or a woman, like something lights up in me. Something lights up in me of like, oh, I can breathe. And that's an incredible experience because I think most of my life I couldn't breathe. I think most of my life I had to be like, okay, you have to hold your breath, you have to hold your life, you have to hold your energy in a certain way. And being able to just breathe, it's for me, it's that personal, like I can just breathe. And it's interesting as we're talking about it, like I don't talk about this a huge amount. My own 24-year-old, 25-year-old now is trans. And so we talk a lot about gender stuff. And they basically say, well, you're basically trans. I don't totally know whether I think of myself as trans or not, but it affects like my ability, for example, like when I'm working with people, because I've touched this part of myself, I'm able to love people unabashedly in a certain way that I couldn't when I was holding my breath. And I'm exaggerating when I say holding my breath, or maybe not. Like, it's not like I was like not breathing, but there's a certain way when I step into that place in a dream where I'm a girl or a woman, it made in a way, it's not even so much about that anymore. having that space to have that sort of full part of the spectrum means that I can also be more of a guy. I can be more of a woman. I can be more of a guy. I can just be more of myself. I mean, one of the things I always loved about Sam, my 25-year-old, and their relationship to being trans is like I asked them one time, like, "Well, are you trans to a man? Like, what? How do you think of it?" And they're just like, "No, I'm trans to Sam. I'm just like trans to myself." And I don't know exactly what that means, but it resonates for me in a way of like I just get to be myself. Like in another world where we had a different culture, would I be like there's this speaker that I really love, Alok Menon, and they are trans and they dress in this beautiful women's clothing. And in another world, would I dress in women's clothing? Actually, they don't, not he, they don't call it women's clothing. It's just clothing, right? Like, so there it is. So this is a great moment right here. Like the whole idea of women's clothing and men's clothing, like there it is right there. It's like, why isn't it just clothing?
Right. We have to label it.
Yeah, well, we have to label it, and people are born with my body type, wear certain type of clothes. People are born with, my wife's body type, wear certain types of clothes. It just makes space for us all to be more creative and more playful. And I do feel on an emotional level, like as a practitioner, like it really and as a parent and as a friend, it allows me to love in ways that I wasn't able to love before. It's a bit of a cliche about that for in the men's world about men being not being able to express their love for each other, but part of the reason that cliche is there is because it's true. Like a lot of men hold back their love for each other, their love for themselves, their love in general. And then, everybody's less alive. Everybody's less able to just be themselves and be in the innocence of like how much we need each other.
Well said.
Funny because I was like, did that make sense? Like I have this voice of like, did any of that make any sense at all? It is a sensitive topic for me. I don't talk about it a lot. It was a really rough topic for me, and of course, I didn't have the language for any of it growing up. You asked me how I dealt with it growing up, I dealt with it by toughening myself up as much as I dealt with it the way everybody who in that era who didn't have any space to deal with it in any other way dealt with it. I became a plumber, you know what I mean? Like, I did men's things, I tried to man up. Not all of that was terrible, like, I also, like, love to camp and hike and do things that some people call guy things, like, I did love to play street basketball. I can be as competitive as the next guy or the next girl for that matter. But, you know, what I love about it all is the space for us all to find out what's true for ourselves.
Right. I do, just as you're speaking, I do think I often tell people just to break the ice when I see a dream work, and like sex, gender dreams, death dreams are often kind of terrifying to people. And I'll give an example. And if you take gender and sexuality out of this completely and just use the
Well,
word bi,
it's interesting that we put sex gender with death. Like it says something about the intensity of the gender conversation
right,
that we group
right.
death with sex and gender
Yes.
dreams.
And people won't tell you those dreams or they'll hold back, but you're absolutely right. Like death is huge. It's like the death of a gender, is that it's a shocking thing. And if you take those out of it and just use the word binary, just this way or that way, black or white, uh, it's threatening to the psyche, and it's threatening to, well, one of the people don't want to go to counseling or therapy generally because they'll have to see a different perspective. It threatens their two ways of being. Things are this way or that way. I just want this or that because it's literally mind blowing, which will show up in a dream as blowing your mind in some way. That to and dreams will do this. They will, as you said, they don't care. they're kind of there to blow your mind and see different perspectives. And once you start seeing different perspectives, it's really uncomfortable, or the words cognitive dissonance happen. It's like, there's an incredible discomfort that happens when you realize there's more than two ways of seeing things. Life becomes far harder, far less predictable, far less certain. And people love that certainty. They love that control. I can control things if it's this way or this way. I can get through my day if it's this way or this way. Once things are unpredictable, but once you open this door, it's like Pandora's box. You realize every dreams don't care. Everything's unpredictable. And so how do you go back to talk about gender after that? How do you go back to say, okay, this is me, I'm a plumber, I practice as a medical doctor, people that are labeled by their label. And you realize that, Bill's, sure, I practice as a medical doctor, sure, I practice as a dream worker, but that's not me. Like, it's part of who I am for sure. And I know that's obvious in a way, but how do we not be one or the other? And this topic brings up very much, it blows that binary way of seeing the world, gender aside, gender or sexuality aside. So it's a topic that I think is hard for a lot of people because they don't want to see, understandably so. It's really uncomfortable to switch from the paradigm of things are this way or black or white to maybe things are gray. And once you start seeing that, and your dreams will just throw it at you. You think you know something, Jacob? You think you know something, Bill? Um, it's gonna throw a different perspective at you over and over again. And oftentimes, when I work with people's dreams, they'll say, "Well, they're looking for the answer," and I said, "Well, look, I can give you some ideas of what a dress might mean or a car might mean, but I'd like to explore it with you first." And it's like, no, the brain wants the answer. Can we just go to the answer for the dreams? Like, well, there's a whole bunch of answers, and if we can kind of work on it together, hopefully you'll see that, and we kind of open the door to possibilities, which is often a greater meaning to the dream and what the feeling is. Um, yeah. So once again, dreams with gender and sexuality have made me think, can I just be less judgmental in the world going forward and less labeling people as one thing or the other, and how my mind is calmer when I've labeled something one way or the other? Because it's hard to be with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's scary for people because I mean, you go back to my own experience, like, I learned to survive by, manning up, basically. I was never very good at it. But, like, it becomes the way that you manage, it becomes the way that you survive, it becomes the reality that you live in, and but I think the thing that I would add to what you're saying is that, like, we need a culture that also lets people know that there's a lot more love possible. There's a lot more beauty possible. There's a lot more creativity possible. Um, so like for example, people who are religious people or Christians or any religion, like being in God's love or being in love, like there's a whole realm of possibility beyond just going to church on Sunday. There's a whole realm of possibility beyond just following the rules, whether it's church rules or gender rules or anything really, even life or death. Like maybe there's something beyond this life. Could we really believe that? Could we really like feel into like, but we have to live that in order to believe it. Like, this is the thing that I love about dreams is they basically like create this psychedelic experience that you can play around with that allows you to play around in a way that's a little bit less scary, right? Like it was always terrifying for me when gender stuff would come up in the world. But dreams gave me a safe place to kind of like anchor an experience inside myself that was like, oh, this isn't so terrifying. It's not a Pandora's box. I mean, it is a Pandora's box if you're trying to fit into the mainstream culture. Like, if you're trying to fit into something that doesn't work for you, then it is a Pandora's box. It's like, it's going to make all the things that it's going to deconstruct all the things that you're trying to do to fit in someone else's version of reality. So, in that way, it's a Pandora's box, but it's a Pandora's box to everything that you're not, to everything that you are, to the, and like so many people are on antidepressants, so many people are on meds, so many people are dealing with issues and they don't realize. And I'm not saying this like as if meds aren't necessary. I'm just saying, like, we don't realize that there's reasons so many of us are depressed. We don't realize that so many people are anxious. It's because, of course, you're going to be depressed or you're going to be anxious if you're trying to fit into something that doesn't work for you. That's not who you are. Even in the early psychiatry field, the whole early psychiatry field was developed at a time when there was a quote outbreak of hysteria in Europe. Have you ever read about this or studied this? There was
Not
this whole,
extensively.
yeah, they called it an outbreak of hysteria, which we would just basically call women having feelings nowadays. But in those days, for women to begin to have their feelings and express those feelings, the psychiatry world had to label that as this. The hysteria in those days was a clinical term. Jung and Freud began their psychiatric careers in this realm of like where women who had lots of feelings were called hysterical as a diagnosis, not even as an insult. It was a diagnosis. We have to figure out how to get these women to stop feeling what they're feeling.
Well, you institutionalize them, which was one of the answers in the past,
Yeah. Yeah. And
horrifically.
and the whole psychology field is built to some extent on that background. I mean, I think it's evolved in the last decades for sure, but how we raise children, how we deal with babies, you know, we have a friend who just had a baby, so I got to have the experience of holding this, I don't know, 4-year-old baby last week, and this
4
child
weeks
has a
old, I assume. 4
four
weeks,
day, four
4
day
days,
old
4
baby,
days old, okay.
4 day. What did I say? 4 week, 4-day old baby, like a week or so ago, and this child has no rules, like when they need to poop, they just poop right then and there. They don't ask permission. When that baby is hungry and needs to be fed, it cries. And it also looks at you with these eyes that are just like so alive that it was like, talk about psychedelic trips. Just holding this child, I was like, I was holding it first and then it was supposed to be Sue's turn. I'm like, no, no, I'm not passing the baby. It was like, it was amazing. But part of the reason it's amazing is because there's so much life that gets lost
Yes.
when we bury parts of who we are. And one of the things that are great about dreams is they're going to open up those places. I guess, but my main point here is that it's not just like it's scary for part of it's scary, but also like I want to hold out the promise for people of like beyond that place of is scary. Like there's a life that you could be living that's not as constricted.
Right. Thank you for saying that. That's why we're doing this podcast, this YouTube is you get stuck. Once you get past the discomfort, uh, the brightness is so bright and you see possibilities for your own life, for other people's life, for the world, for the universe. You see possibilities that art can express, music can express. But once you're stuck in those binary, I think of some dream examples. There's a somebody I worked with a number of dreams, and she is a fiercely independent person who's married and happily married, but in the dream, that's like a husband wife thing, and I referred to her as a wife, and she got very. It's like I'm not a wife. It's like well, but you kind of are. But it was the labeling, and I don't think she had words for it, but it was a very very loaded thing. Even though she's married and she has the title of a wife, she does not want to be called a wife. And on many levels, I get it. but that energy, there's the labeling and negating of who she is as a wife, and there's the construct of what's expected in society of a wife, or she's somebody that doesn't belong to the church but has some church luggage like many people do, of okay, I can't truly be me within the structure of what sometimes churches can say it must be this way or this way. And how can she still be a wife yet still not be labeled a wife and carry that lightly and go forward in life and be who she is? um and just the dream moment where there's two people, it's like a husband wife, brought up this conversation, and I think helped her reconcile and talk it out loud how difficult it is to be labeled a wife and yet be who she is in this world. And another dream example, I think, when you said that binary, that things are this way or this way. I've recently worked with another person who had a driving dream. People, when you're driving down a road or the highway of life, it's very binary. I would say it's this way or that way. You're driving down the road. Very rare in a dream do you get just to drive down the road. Either the brakes don't work, the car's going off a cliff, the zombie apocalypse is coming down the road, or like a bit like, or the car veers into the bushes suddenly. One of a common dream that people have, I found at least 5 or 6 times in their first two dream sessions, they're driving down the road and the road just, it goes a different direction than what they thought. And some version of that, it's like, wait a second, things aren't linear anymore. The lines on the road aren't straight anymore. It's like dreams love to play with that. So you think things are straight. You think you're going down the straight road of life, do you? They immediately throw
Speaking
you a
of
curve.
sexuality.
Right. Right. So you throw in sexuality into that, and you think you know what you're talking about, do you? You think things are linear. And once dreams are excellent at that, because once somebody thinks they know, and how do you teach people to work with dreams? It's like, well, first you have to go into your own dreams, is one of the things we've said, is because you realize how non-linear things usually are, or threes are a common number in dreams. People say, well, why so many threes? And it's like, well, I don't know, but you can the Christian Father, Son, Holy Ghost thing comes up for a lot of people, but how threes aren't linear. And I don't know why threes are so common, and but it's not point A to point B. It already starts you thinking differently. Uh, is one of my, but I don't know. I don't know. You're with me though, right? There's how common the number is, um, a third way of being, or not this way or that way, not one political group or another political group, not one.
Dreams aren't very binary. They're very psychedelic, they're very creative, they're very, like, different shades of colors rather than one thing, you know, boom, boom, like I'm curious, going back to your dreams of, like, being a woman, like, how was that for you to be a woman and to work with those dreams? If that's okay to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one in particular, what it felt like the 1700s. I'm wearing a dress. It opened me up to a different way of seeing the world. I felt more vulnerable, felt more exposed, felt more less empowered in a way, um, in the moment, but at the same time, very natural and very matter of fact. Like, it's not up for debate. It's not a choice. This is just the way it is. And that matter of factness, that waking up, if somebody says I was a different gender in a dream, you don't argue with it. It just is. And
Right,
it's
right.
you
In waking life, we can argue about it all we want, but in a dream
right. But in on the other side, whatever that is, it's
So, but
Right. How do we approach things from a different perspective, or where there's differences of opinion, or goodness knows, politically, regionally, with wars, with this, if people could only see from a different perspective, what is possible uh, in any situation of conflict. So they were those dreams among many that just helped me see a different perspective. That's really, really hard to put to words. It's more of a felt perspective. And I'd have to say one of the when we were talking about thinking about doing this podcast, the more I haven't had the same experience as you. I've always, been attracted to women or the feminine as an attraction, yet that whole what we might call masculinity, or I haven't felt, even though I've had more feminine traits, even my dreams have shown up, I've had to get in touch with my masculinity. I had a difficult childhood. I had a dream where I'm sitting in, I know, one of my elementary school chairs, and I'm sitting in a pool of blood. And the feeling is my balls have been chopped off. I've been emasculated, is the feeling. And I don't actually have a visual of that, but metaphorically and in my life and through the way my father treated me, I was subservient on every level. So there was a definite master servant sort of being, and trying to get back in touch with my more assertive side, which might be associated with masculinity. And people that masculine, feminine, what does that mean? Or divine feminine, divine masculine? How can we be with these things? And dreams challenge the way you might look at those, because there might be a very supportive masculine figure in a dream, a very supportive feminine figure in a dream. How do we navigate that through feelings? But one of the resulting things after having many, many of these dreams is my admiration for the feminine has just gone up. Like I've just, and I think the more I've found my own masculinity, the more I've admired femininity. And the thought of toxic masculinity sounds bizarre to me. At which point do you stop admiring others, or do you stop having respect um, for the other when you find one part of yourself, or when you find the feminine part of yourself? I think it gives you acceptance for the masculine part. And there's this hard to put to words way of just being less judgmental and being in the world in a different way, where it's okay to express one or the other and then have respect for one or the other. I don't know if I've explained that well, but that's been my experience of things.
I mean, I think it's hard to explain well. I think it's hard. I mean, I think part of the problem is that we don't have a great language for it, right? Like the language itself is very binary. So it's
Yeah.
hard. Like, how do you, when you're talking about like respecting the masculine, or what does toxic masculinity even mean? Like, I don't, I understand what people are talking about when they talk about toxic masculinity. There's plenty of it here in the States, you know, but it's, to me, that's not even masculinity. So you can call it toxic masculinity if you want, but
Yeah,
it's,
I
to
agree.
me, it's not even. So we're using a word masculinity, and we can use it in this phrase toxic masculinity in our culture, but it's not. That's not toxic masculinity. Isn't masculinity to me? I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's just hatred. I just think it's hatred and shame. Honestly, I think we should just call it what it is. It's hatred and shame. It's
Yes, I agree.
people that are ashamed of their own sort of gender sexuality and project that hatred onto other people. It's just toxic. It's
Right.
not masculinity or femininity. And I think what you actually explain really beautifully is how exploring these things actually expands our consciousness. It makes us less judgmental because we're more, I think we're naturally more the more we're in ourselves, the more we don't have to try to be non-judgmental. we just have a fuller range of experience in ourselves, and then it's easier to accept other people. The more we accept ourselves, the easier it is to just be like, why would I judge someone else for who they are? I mean, I may judge somebody for what they do if they do something that I consider abusive or wrong, but I'm not going to judge somebody because I don't understand them. I'm not going to judge them. The more space I have for like, there's a richness in honoring the self in this very deep way, in this very sacred spiritual way, the heart and soul of who I am. And this is part of what I learned from these dreams of being a woman or being a girl. Like, I just learned to like honor the totality of who I am. And then, like you said, it naturally changed my understanding of like what it means to be feminine, what it means to be masculine. I still don't have great definitions for all of it, but I just feel, like I feel comfortable in myself, and it makes it easier to just not be judgmental of other people. It makes judgment comes from our own inability to accept ourselves, like the kind of judgment that you're talking about anyway. I'm not talking about judgment. If you have judgment about someone who's doing something hurtful, I would call that discernment, but judgment of like, oh, there's something wrong with that person because they're different than me or they believe something different than me. I think that's just a reflection of us not having space in our own bodies, in our own psyche, and our own heart and soul to just be ourselves. And I think there's a kind of individuality there that like is spacious in some way that even the word individual does. Again, it's like a word that we talk about individualism as if it means something that's separate. I think the more individual you are, the more connected you are to everybody. Does that logically make sense? Not from the language and things that I was taught, but
That's not linear, Bill.
it's very not linear.
But I would agree, and it's like a lot of the Carl Jung quotes or a lot of wise quotes of like the more you know yourself or individuation is like a word that Carl Jung. I think there's another quote. Individuation is not for sissies. I think it's but it's very difficult to get there. You have to go through a lot of discomfort and break societal social assumptions of norms to get to a place of knowing oneself. But when you're there, and God knows I'm not there. It's a process. It's a journey, not a destination. Like how it does open up the possibility for me less judgment and acceptance of what's going on. How do you see things clearer? And yeah, I like what you said. I like what your definition of judgment.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I wanted to get back to was like around the issue of sexuality and dreams in relationship to gender. I would, on a practical level, like you've said, people have said to you, you've gotten some feedback of people with like some practical suggestions. Like one of the things that's hard about sexual dreams for people is there's so much like kind of moral taboo around it. But one of the ways to get around that or to play with it anyway, that I think is a great thing to do when you have a dream and you're attracted to somebody is to just be the other person. To like not assume that it's like, so if you're a married person, you're in a relationship, this is one of the taboos in dreams, right? Is like people will have dreams with sexual desire towards somebody else in a dream and they'll bring it into a session with me. And it's like, well, I can't, I feel terrible about it, blah, 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 which I understand. Like people want to be faithful, loyal to their partners. That's great. I respect that. But one, dreams are a different reality. You're allowed to play in it. It's not a betrayal. Just flip it a little bit and play around with it and see what it's like to be on the other side of that equation. Because sometimes that's part of what it is. Part of what we're attracted to is like missing parts of ourselves. I don't think that's always true, but I think it's certainly one way to be with the, sexual dreams is to like play around with the gender part of it, of like, If I'm so afraid, like, because I have a woman in a dream that I'm attracted to, well, then just how is it to be the woman?
Right.
And oftentimes that, like, just that, like, one twist changes the whole thing from a taboo to a kind of like, "Oh, there's actually something here. There's something here for me that I'm drawn to that's important to me."
Mhm. So in an actual dream where
Yeah.
people often have a hard time doing this in a dream, but when working with a dream, we'll say, "What's it like to be this person over there in the dream?" And you don't always, I mean, with horrible and torturous scenarios, you don't do that for obvious reasons. But if there's a more benign dream, or if there's can you actually embody that character in the dream if you're able to look back at yourself? And if sometimes I'll try and get that person to give a message in a dream. What's the feeling? Or if you had a message for yourself, what would it be? And it may not work, but that different perspective can really, and when it does work, and when people can see that different perspective, it opens up a lot of possibilities for what's possible.
Yeah, another little tip in terms of working with dreams, like, when you say, like, a lot of times people be like, "Well, I don't know how to be a woman," like, they'll have a dream where they're attracted to a woman. They're a male body person, they're attracted to a woman, and they are like, you'll ask them, "Well, what would it be like to flip it and be the woman?" They'll be like, "I don't know. I can't do that."
Right.
One of the ways to play with that is just to divide it out. Like, okay, like maybe 90% of you can't do that, or maybe 99% but somewhere, because you had the dream, there's some like 1% of you that knows what it's like to be that woman. What is it like to touch into that? Just the 1%. I'll play these little numbers games with people. What's it like to let that 1% of you be the woman, or vice versa? If it's a woman in a dream attracted to a man, or a woman who's attracted to a woman, or a man that's attracted to a man, just like, well, what's it like to be the other person in the dream? What's it like to be the person who's receiving the attraction? What's it
Very
like to
much
be
so.
someone who's like, which is often a harder thing than the gender thing for people. I think the harder thing it's easy for people to be attracted to somebody, but to be the person who's receiving the attraction, to be like, oh, this person thinks I'm attractive. This person thinks I'm beautiful, is actually harder for most people than the gender thing.
I agree.
Because there's so much shame in our culture about how we look, our weight, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not beautiful, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, to help people to find the 1% of themselves that knows that they're attractive or beautiful is an incredibly powerful exercise
Yes.
that goes far. The trick is it goes far beyond 1%. The 1%
Yes.
is just like how you open the door. I do it for myself too. Like, I'll have a hard time with some of these moments in a dream. I'm like, okay, Bill, like, just like, I understand 99% of you can't do it, but what about that 1% of 1% that can like play with it a little bit? And
Yes.
there's something about getting past that barrier that, like, I can't do that, that's super helpful and opens things up way more than people realize is possible. I
I
guess it's
agree.
in the psychedelic language, it's a microdose. Just microdose it. Just microdose it a little bit and see what that's like.
And we do ask people to do in non like, we ask people to be the child, we ask people to be the bear, we ask people to, or I find it particularly effective. And when you're being chased dreams, can you, like, look back and, or if they're able to go there, if it's not too scary, can they be the whatever it is? Sometimes it's a fox chasing them, or can you be the fox? And if that fox has, can you be the person? But it's particularly loaded when, especially, I agree what you say, when there's somebody showing affection to you in a dream, regardless of the gender, it's hard to receive love, which fits a lot of, Christian narratives as I understand them too. Like, to accept God's love to is the hardest thing. To accept love, to just receive, is really, really hard. To know that we're worthy of receiving love. So that's tied into gender and sexuality dreams, I believe. It's like to know you can have love, you can have pleasure. And it's amazing how people resist that, in my experience.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's one of the scariest things for people. I think that's one of the boxes that because when you're not going back to the not breathing thing, like when you've learned to like the challenge for people is that if I let myself know that I'm beautiful, it opens up all this other material. Like it opens up, well, what about all the places where I wasn't treated that way?
Right.
So I feel very tender about it. Like I'm saying it, a lot of things, someone pointed at this about one of the things I said in the last video that like it's not so easy to do some of the things that we're talking about. And I respect that deeply.
Mhm.
I think it's actually important to acknowledge, and this is why I like the microdose model. It's like important to be like, yeah, and even if you can't do something, it's like, okay, then like, can I be with like, well, then why is it so hard for me to do that? Like, why is it so hard for me? Okay, so I can't, I'm working with a dream and I have this idea of like, well, what would it be like for me to be the one receiving the love? And this wall comes up. You don't have to bust down that wall, right? Like you can just be with like, wow. I think it's a very loving thing to just be like, wow, what is this wall for me? And can I bring love to that space of like, actually, I don't even have 1% right now anyway. Like, I think personally, I think everybody has 1% somewhere in them where they know. But that doesn't matter. That 1% could be on the other side of some wall that they don't want to, that's actually really, actually literally overwhelming in the moment or literally impossible for them to access in the moment. And I think it's a real act of love to respect that wall also and
Mhm.
just be with like, well, so what is that for me that this is so, so hard for me? Why is it such a challenge? And then what happens is other stories start to open up, like places where they weren't seen as lovable, they weren't seen as attractive, they weren't seen as beautiful, they weren't treated the way that a human being should be treated with care and kindness. And there's a kind of love and that kind of tenderness also. It's kind of why I often will use the word tenderness almost more than the word love, because love, it's a little bit like the gender thing. It's like it's almost hard to process. I can't, no, I can't let in that I'm lovable. But it's like, could I be tender with myself? Is sometimes easier for a lot of us to do. Like, well, could you at least be tender with yourself around that?
Mhm.
Is sometimes a way to bring love when you might not be able to be like, I can't bring love to that place, but maybe I can bring a different kind of, a kind of ease to it, a kind of tenderness to it, which is a kind of love, I think.
But it's hard. I'm with you. It's hard, and to go one of the feedbacks from our um, last podcast and Light and Dark Part 2, that it's hard to let people in, to share with others can be incredibly hard, especially when people's experience of life is they've been attacked literally physically, if not emotionally or societally, when they've shared their journey with others. Like, how do you share when your recollection of things is that you're going to be the victim again? It's a hard place to be. There's one thing from the last podcast, if I too just digress for a moment, who talking about how do you be with the oncoming waves, it just struck me of uh talked about not being alone with it, but art. Just struck us. Goodness, art, music,
Journaling.
journaling, all of the beautiful art in this world, however you define that, from stories to physical art to creativity to music. That's a big way I've coped with music a lot in my life. It's been a lifesaver to help me through difficult emotional moments, for sure. So,
Yeah, we have some of your artwork up on the YouTube channel and on the podcast. If you look at the little, like, logo or whatever on the channel, you'll see a little bit of Jake's artwork.
there's a lot of it. Thanks, Bill.
I love it.
Yeah, I feel like my mind is mush after this.
I can
That
see that.
like, yeah, the non-linear of this, the non-binary of this, Bill, is blowing my mind.
Good. It's good. You
Yeah,
doing
I'm
alright with
almost
that?
yeah, I'm doing all right with it, but, yeah, I'm kinda speechless, Bill. Yeah,
I mean, I think this might be a good we're 55 minutes in or so, so it might be a good place to wind down. We could always do just like we did the light and darkness part 2. We could do a gender part 2 or gender and sexuality part 2. Um, there's certainly a lot more stuff on the sexual side if we wanted to explore it around
yes,
sexuality and dreams. We haven't really touched into very much. Um, but yeah, this could be a good place to wind down if that works for you.
that works for me, Bill. Mind blown.
Mind blown. Okay. Well, hopefully, those of you listening have also had your minds blown in a good way. If you have questions or anything, please let us know either in the comments or if you have our emails and you'd rather email us privately, please do that. And may take us a while. Like this original question came up in a comment months ago. But we do keep a file and we will get back to people's questions. So hit like and subscribe also if you want to support the channel. If you want to get notifications, click the little notification button if you're on YouTube. I don't know how to do that on the spot podcast. I guess on the podcast you hit follow and hopefully you'll get notifications on Spotify and Apple. Are we good here?
We're good. Thanks,
All right.
Bill. It's
Thank
been
you,
fun
Jake.
once
Great to be
again.
with you. Okay.
Likewise.
Bye bye.
Cheers.